Good morning. Welcome to... oh, excuse me. Sorry, I didn't mean to cough into the mic like that. Clear my throat, sorry. Welcome to Freeway Bible Study for, the happy first day of spring 2018. March 20th. Yahoo! I love spring. Well, I love summer too, and autumn and winter. You know, they all have their seasons. So, this is Genesis, what is it, 17? Hold on, yeah, I think it's 17. This would be the covenant of circumcision. My name is Kurt Bell. I'm your, not your reader, but your host, perhaps, of Freeway Bible Study. This is a daily activity that I do, Monday through Friday. While I commute to work, I read the Bible. I read one chapter a day over breakfast with my little puppy dog. You know, I sit there in the morning when my family's still asleep because they can get up a little later. So I sit there together with the dog and we eat breakfast and we read the Bible one chapter a day. We're marching our way from Genesis through Revelation. And I read it at least 5 times, each chapter, at least 5 times in 2 different versions. New International Edition first, followed by a reading from the King James Edition, and then I go back and forth, and then I do one shot where I listen to it, and I listen to it being read via a Bible app in the King James Edition while I'm simultaneously reading it in the New International Version, you know, my beautiful paper Bible. And I think that gives me helps me to see it from the 2 different perspectives, and also helps to solidify the story in my mind. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is an important disclaimer, I'm an atheist, so I'm not a believer, but I'm curious to know about the story in the Bible, and if there's some truth in there, which I'm sure there's a lot of truth, but it's the supernatural bits that I'm a skeptic about. I want to know it as well as I can. I don't want to reject something that I haven't made at least a good effort to understand, right? And if in the process of studying it I discover that there's good reason to think it's true, then you bet I'll end up believing. It doesn't mean that I would necessarily abide it, right? I might believe it. I might say, wow, okay, well, it looks like there really is a God. Didn't mean I would become a follower of that God. You know, I may disagree with that God's standards, in which case I would be what would that be? That would be a conscientious objector. And given what I know about the Christian God so far, that would be the case. Hey, a motorcyclist, you were my brother! So let's get on with it. So Genesis 17. Quick recap of where we are now. We're still following the tale of Abram, who was about to get a name change, he along with his wife. They were down in Egypt land. Then they came back up to the land of Canaan. Lot was with him, his nephew, Abram's nephew. Lot went up to Sodom. Abram went down a little further south and set up a house down there. And it's been a good long time. You know, Abram is now 99 years old. Back when he was 88 years old, or was it 86? Because they were childless. A special arrangement was made between Abram's wife Sarai and Abram and Sarai's slave girl Hagar, to give Hagar unto Abram to be wife, that they might have an heir. That all took place in Genesis 16. And that didn't go over so well, because as soon as Hagar was pregnant, Sarai felt, you know, she despised her mistress, you know, Sarai, who felt wronged, and went to Abram, who told her deal with Hagar as you see fit, and I guess she didn't take such good care of her after that, because Hagar ran away. But the angel of the Lord met her off in a spring along the road to somewhere, and sent her packing back to Abram and family, where she had her son, who was named Ishmael, and who we know will strive against humanity. Now, so this is where the story begins now in Genesis 17. So if that was it 86 or 88? I'm simply thinking that was 86. I think Abram was 86 at that time. Oh, we know that we can do the math, right? Because we know that Ishmael was 13 years old, because we're going to learn that in Genesis 17. So let's do the math. Okay, what's 99 minus 13? So that would be 87, 86. There we go. Okay, so we know that Ishmael was born when Abram was 86. It's 13 years later, which means he's 99. And the chapter opens with God's sudden appearance on the scene. Really big, loud. If ever God's made a big entry, this is it. Enter stage right, boom, there's God. Abram! Forgive me, I can't help but be dramatic sometimes, but it just, in the Bible, it rings of Abram's voice. Of God's voice just coming to Abram, and in fact, it's so awe-inspiring unto Abram that he falls on his face. So I don't think I'm exaggerating when I try to characterize it that way. Abram, you are my. And now there was a little detail in there, and I can't remember what it was. I will make a covenant with you. Oh no, I remember what he says. Yeah, I'm glad I remember. He says, Abram, I will be your God, and you must walk perfect before me. Something along those lines. He's admonishing Abram to be a perfect man. Still Abram. This is where I got to make a name change mid-chapter. He tells him he's got to be a perfect man. And then God goes on to again state his covenant. Now remember, this is the fourth time that God has stated his covenant with Abram in basically the exact, nearly identical terms. Now there's going to be a fifth statement of covenant that's going to be at different terms a little later in this chapter. But remember forgive me if I'm sounding disrespectful, but it must sound this way a little bit to Abram at this point when I say the old song and dance, because God has 3 times so far told Abram the exact same thing. Once when on the way down to Egypt near outside Bethel, again outside Egypt, again outside Bethel on the way back when they were headed out of Egypt, a third time when they entered the land of Canaan, and all 3 times God said the exact same thing with slight difference. I will make a great nation of you. Your seed will number as the stars in heaven, the grains of sand and the dust of the earth. Now Abram's 99 years old in a time when no one's going to live any more than 120 years. And Sarai her menopause has already struck. I know that because I read further, and we know that from, I think, in the very next chapter, that Sarai actually laughs when she finds out that God says she's going to have a son, because she knows that her time of having that time is past, right? She's done with that. So, and of course Abram must know that as well. So here we go. So Abram's down on his face on the ground. God appears with a thunderclap, of drama. Abram, follow me. Be perfect unto me. I will be your Lord and give you an everlasting covenant. And I'm sure, and Abram drops to his face, in acquiescence to, the appearance of God. And but I'm sure he must be muttering in his mind, oh yeah, here we go again, right? Because don't tell me that Abram doesn't have a lot of free time. He's got lots of servants and people to take after his cattle, and he's an old man, getting pretty old actually, and he must be kind of dwelling on it sometimes. What about the offspring numbering like the stars and the sand and the dust of the earth, right? My life is kind of winding down now. So here God is, and God sits in with the exact same old thing. And Abram then does what I think can be excused of a man, and the exact same thing that his wife is going to do, Sarai, who will be known as Sarah in the next chapter. She does as well. He laughs. Well, first he says in his heart, which is no place to hide, because God, at least this God can see what's in your heart. He says, First he laughs out loud, apparently. He's down on his face. God says, walk in perfection, and I will be your God, and I will grant you dust upon the earth. Your seed will be forever. Great nations will come of you. And Abram's down on his face on the ground, and he kind of laughs out loud. And in his heart, Abram says, yeah, right. Like a man, I'm almost 100 years old. I'm gonna make a son, and my wife is 90 years old. That's gonna happen. And God doesn't get upset at Abram the way he gets upset in the next chapter with Sarai, who does exactly the same thing, because she's in the kitchen. Remember, she's in the kitchen preparing a meal for God, and she overhears that she's going to have a son, and she laughs out. She laughs again. She laughs in her heart. She laughs. She doesn't even say it out loud, and God calls her out for that. I mean, nothing bad happens, but it just goes to show you, there's no place to hide. God can read your thoughts. So there's that. So God, so let's just get back to where we were. Abram kind of laughs, and in his heart he's saying, yeah, right. And now God goes on. God just kind of ignores that, and he goes on with the fifth declaration of his covenant in the lifetime of Abram. And he says this. He says, or maybe he says this first part a little bit sooner, but he basically says something right around here. He says, and you will no longer be known as Abram. Henceforth you will be Abraham. So now we got it. No more Abram. Now we're Abraham. And this is where, so far God hasn't asked a lot of Abram, now Abraham, in the story of Genesis. He just basically shows up from time to time every 2 decades or so and exclaims his covenant, which he doesn't seem to be following through on. But now he says something more. He says, okay, and as a token of my relationship with you, I want you to do something kind of special. I want you to circumcise all the males in your household. So there's kind of 2 things to pull away from that. One, we're seeing that this is all taking place within Abram's household, which will later become the umbrella and the fountainhead and the basically the root source of all the nations the Abrahamic tradition, right? So we're going to see that. That's an important. We have the start. This is kind of the start. It all descends down from Adam through Noah through to Abram, and now we're going to start branching off. It's important to note the lineages. And he says, but to mark yourself as my people, I want you to cut off the foreskins of your tinkle bots or your wee or whatever you want to call it. I'm trying to find some we might some PG-13 or G way to describe it. Your penis, okay? I mean, that's fine. That's a medical term anyway, right? So now, when I first read this, I was thinking, wow, that must have been a shocker, right? You want me to do what? Until I did a little research. Like I said yesterday, I try not to do research, but sometimes I can't help it. So I did a little research on circumcision, and it turns out it wasn't that big a deal. I mean, it was actually pretty common. The Egyptians did it. The people, I believe the Canaanites did not. Or did the Canaanites do it? The Canaanites did not do it. The Greeks did not do it. I believe the Persians, they did not do it either. Now I'm sounding like a whole bunch of do nots, but there were a lot of areas that did in fact do this at that time. And it was done in different ways. In some traditions it was, this is where it gets a little graphical. You would actually take, the foreskin and kind of pull it forward and, amputate it. I didn't know that was how it was done. I thought it was you just ran the knife around the edges and then just took it off. But what do you do after that? I mean, what's left? Just a bleeding mess? Oh gosh. No, but it was like an amputation. And I actually saw an interesting bit of art from the old days showing that happening, and the dude that's getting it done to, he's actually talking to some other guy, so maybe it's not such a big deal, but it's gotta hurt, right? So there was that, but the Egyptians and others had slightly different surgical techniques. So we've actually archaeologists have looked at the mummies and have been able to discern the surgical techniques that were done for the males. And in other cultures, it wasn't so much as an amputation as simply an incision that then caused the morphology. Is that right? The morphology, or just the way that it looked to different. And it's thought that this was done as a couple of things. One is a rite of passage. It was done not just when when young boys were born, but also for a puberty rite. That was the case in Egypt. So when boys reached the age of puberty, they would be circumcised. It was also done as a way to mark as an inclusion in a group, which seems to be the case here. So it's possible that, if you look at this from a more secular perspective, it's possible that if what we're relating is a true story, that Abram may have picked up this idea from his time, in Egypt, where he probably witnessed, if not the actual event itself of circumcision, at least maybe the results of it, and maybe was aware of the practice, and where it was done at the age of puberty. And it's really interesting to note that how old his first son Ishmael is at the time that this all occurs. Ishmael is 13. Guess what? That's right about that right time, right? So something to think about. So anyway, so God says, this self-same day you will. He didn't say that. He says, it's you. I want everybody who's born of your house, who becomes a part of your household, or who is purchased, slaves even, and any baby that's born after the 8th day, any male baby at least, will be circumcised. And he says, this will be a sign of my covenant with you, a sign upon your flesh. There's something very beautiful in a way about that, about marking your flesh with the sign of your allegiance, right? Whatever that case may be. So, I would think that the henna tattoo, right, the little ink tattoo, would be a more friendlier one, but certainly not as permanent. So, anyway, and then God says, and this is really interesting, God says, this will be my mark of my covenant with you. And then his voice grows a little gravelly and accusatory, and basically says, and anyone who any male who is not circumcised is outside my covenant and will be separate from his people. I had to read that a couple of times before it kind of came out, that I was realizing that God's threat, so to speak, of not abiding this covenant was not to be distanced from God, but to be distanced from the people, which I would assume also implies distance from God. But this is a secular threat. He's basically saying, you will not be one of us. Now, if anybody knows anything about the Jewish people, and I don't know very much about the Jewish people. I have Jewish friends. I know of some Jewish communities in my area. I know a community in Orange County where I live. I know there's a big Jewish community in Los Angeles and elsewhere. But the Jews are maybe less about being religious and more about being Jewish. It's like my wife says. She's Japanese. My wife says, my religion is being Japanese. My religion is being Japanese. For a lot of Jews, I think their religion is being Jewish, right? I mean, it's an ethnic group. It's a heritage. It's got its own language. It's I never realized until now how similar the Japanese culture and the Jewish culture might actually be. And you can believe all kinds of things every way to Sunday in the Jewish tradition. Your rabbi might say that there's no afterlife, that you just sleep with the fathers, or another rabbi may say something different or have different ideas about everything, but you're all Jewish. Of course, they do have some sects, but I don't think they've splintered nearly as much as the Christians have. What are Christians up to? 30,000 different sects now, I think. So there's that. So it kind of makes sense when you say he will not be of our people. That's a pretty big threat if you think about the way the Jewish culture is, that just being a part of the in crowd really means a lot. But very, very interesting. There's no threat of excommunication from God's, presence. There's certainly no threat of hell. None of that. It's just, you're not going to be a part of the club with the people. Interesting, huh? And that's in alignment with what I've been, learning about the Jewish view of life and the afterlife, which is actually a more secular perspective than the Christian perspective, where the time that you're alive is the time to get it right. Christians would say the same thing too. It's the time to get it right, but whereas Christians would say that that's just the proving ground, right? Life is a sieve and a filter for who will spend eternity in God's presence and who will burn forever ever in hell. The Jewish don't seem to see it that way, at least not the Jewish traditions that I've run across so far, and certainly not here in Genesis 17. That doesn't seem to be the case. Can you see the beautiful sunrise coming up over there in the past? That's nice. So now, so he says that. So God says. So let's just recap real quick. God appears to Abraham in a thunderous, resonant tones and saying, be perfect, and I will give you descendants as the stars, the moons, and his sun. And Abram falls on his face, sitting down there, kind of laughing, chuckling to himself. Yeah, right. I'm 100 years old, and then this is your fourth time in so many decades telling me this. He's doubting God for sure, but we know that that's Abram's style, right? He doubted God a few chapters back a couple of times when God kept saying the same thing, and Abram kept pleading like Luke Skywalker in kind of a whiny voice. But how do I know it's true? So this is just in keeping. Abram, this is no surprise to God. God's seen this in Abram before, and God says, but wait, there's more. Even though I haven't really come through on anything, he doesn't say that, but even though I haven't come through on any of my promise yet, I will, except maybe I delivered made you the hero of Canaan by defeating the armies of Chedorlaomer. Hey, I remembered it again! Woohoo! That's a tough name. Starts with a K. Even though I did do that for you, and I've made you very wealthy and very, very prosperous, I want you to do one more thing. Just cut off the tip of your giggle stick, and you'll be good to go. And everybody else in the camp as well. Now, how did that go down? So afterwards, after God, rises back up to heaven, Abram's got to assemble everybody and say, okay, man, something we got to do. That would have been interesting. I wonder how that went down. So anyway, so then God says that this will be the covenant, and then as soon as that, and then Abraham now. No longer Abram. Abraham says, in his incredulity, because he just doesn't believe that this is going to happen. he's like, you're saying you're going to give me so much, God. Isn't it enough if you would just watch? Or this is literally what he says. Something. I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like this: wouldn't it be enough if you would just keep an eye on Ishmael, my one son, and make sure that he's okay? He's doubting God. He's saying, God, yeah, this is nice that you keep promising this, but I've got one son. I'd be happy if you just keep an eye on him and keep him safe, and do your job do your stuff with him. Take care of Ishmael. And God's like, Ishmael, I hear you. He literally says that. He says yeah, I hear you about more in the New International Version than the King James. In the New International, he actually says, yeah, I hear you about Ishmael, and I'll take care of him. I'm going to make 12 tribes of Ishmael. 12 kings will come of him. I got his back, okay? But Abraham, my real covenant will be extended to your son that will come from Sarai, who by the way, I don't want you to call her Sarai anymore. She will be Sarah henceforth. So now we've got Abraham and Sarah. No more Abram and Sarai. My real covenant through you will be passed on to the son that will come from Sarah, and his name will be Isaac, with a double A. Let me just get over here. Get out from under this rock truck. which throws rocks up. So, okay, so he says that, and then promptly God, says, okay, work here done, gotta go, and flies off to heaven, or whatever God does to, because he's standing there right before Abraham. And imagine the gumption, imagine the nerve of Abraham. He's standing in front of God, and yet he's laughing and doubting in his heart and all this. But again, remember, this is like the fourth time that he stood before God, and God's promised something which so far hasn't come to fruition, right? I mean, it looks like he's at the end of his life. And now once more he did it, but he promised this time a son to be called Isaac that would be born basically a year from that time. And then God is gone back off to heaven, or wherever he goes, where I guess he goes off to everywhere. Now Abram, stands up, dusts off his clothes, says, well, got some work to do today. And that's when he gets all the men and all the boys and all the babies in more than 8 days, and in that, and to use the Bible's language, the King James edition, the self-same, see, I was trying to save that language for now, not use it earlier. In that self-same day, he circumcised everybody. And from the way it sounds like Abram did hit the job himself on himself. Woohoo! Man. And that speaks, later we'll see a lot of, monks that will do some pretty incredible things later in life, including, well, let's not get there. Maybe Abram was the first of those to show the way to do the job. If you're going to do it right, do it yourself, right? So the job was done. So there must have been about a week of lounging around by all the men in Abram's camp. Well, they all recovered, and I don't mean to laugh. I'm sorry, but I mean, if it really did happen that way, that's definitely the way it must have gone down, right? I mean, they're men after all. I mean, they just cut off each other, their own or each other at the end of their peepees, and so I mean that's gotta hurt, and no matter how old you are, and they gotta recover. So there they go. So now is there a little more? Why do I think I'm missing something? I think that's it. Hold on. Hold on. Yep, that's it. Yep. So that's it. So we've made our way through Genesis 17, and if you were wondering what I was doing just there, yeah, I was being bad. I was looking it up. I brought up the Bible app on my phone real quick while I'm riding, and just took a quick look to see what the end of the chapter said, and that was how it ended. Bad, Kurt. That's not good. That's a sin. So I promise not to do that in the future. So thank you for joining me for another Freeway Bible study, Genesis 17. Abraham's covenant, the covenant of circumcision, I think it's called. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Make it a good life, okay? Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Until next time. Until tomorrow. See you.